Well, as expected, formal employment plunged by 86,000 in the second quarter of the year. According to Stats SA data, this decrease was largely due to decreases in community services, which is largely government services, followed by manufacturing and construction. More encouraging, though, is that on an annual basis between June 2020 and June 2021, total employment increased by 60,000 or 0.6%. On a quarterly basis, full-time employment decreased by 27,000. Part-time employment also decreased by a whopping 59,000 during that time. Gross earnings paid to employees fell by 0.1 billion, that is 100 million rand. But basic salary and wages paid to employees increased 1.1%. During this period, bonus and overtime paid to employees dropped by minus 10.8%. However, average monthly earnings increased by 1.7%. Well, for more on these data, I'm joined by Dr Azar Jammine. He's the Chief Economist at Econometrix. Thank you very much, Dr Jammine, for joining us. So 86,000 jobs were lost in the second quarter compared to the first. What were the main drivers there, do you read?
If you look at the detail, a lot of that was caused by losses in jobs of part-time employees. And conversely, if you look at the year-on-year increase in part-time employment of 8.6%, it contrasts quite dramatically with the virtually no increase in full-time employment. So what one suspects happened is that businesses during the recovery phase, as lockdown restrictions were lifted from the third quarter of last year, started employing people, but did so on a part-time basis because they felt uncertain about the future. And by the time it came to the second quarter of this year, they felt that they had got what they wanted out of this and started feeling a little uneasy about a continuation of the recovery at the same pace, especially given the onset of the phase 3 of the COVID-19 virus that resulted in a reinstitution of a number of restrictions during the second quarter on movement.
Dr Jammine, what do you envisage the trend will be when it comes to full-time working vis-a-vis part-time? Given the lack of confidence in the labour market, particularly on the part of employers, do you think they're going to rather prefer to go for part-time employees rather than full-time?
Yes, I think this is a new phase that we are likely to enter in the economy, where you'll see a lot of volatility in part-time employment as a means of compensating for the uncertainty surrounding the economy. One is also very cognizant of the fact that there are significant labour restrictions and regulations on full-time employment, and this is acting as a deterrent for employers to take workers on a full-time basis.
So from a gross earnings perspective, I mean, we've been seeing declines, what with limited wage increases and so on. But what are your observations around the trends there? Because that doesn't seem to be a major threat every time the Reserve Bank talks about inflation. Wage inflation doesn't really seem to feature that much.
Yes, I think at the moment, because of the amount of uncertainty and the relative weakness of the economy, I think workers are a little more cautious in terms of their wage demands. The inflation rate itself has come down quite significantly over the last couple of years. And so what one is seeing is a tempering of wage demands. People are only too happy to hold on to their jobs. Especially when they're on a full-time basis. So I think I do believe it also varies from sector to sector, but overall the Reserve Bank is not particularly concerned about wage inflation at this stage.
So what is the silver bullet to turning the fortunes around of the formal jobs market?
The silver bullet is what people have been talking about for years and years and years, and that is for a change in the structure of the economy and for the government to step in to make it far easier for business to actually operate than is the case at present. In other words, relieve the burden, especially on small businesses, of a whole host of regulatory demands, try and clamp down on corruption, and of course improve the educational outcomes of the country in order to make people more able to add value to the economy and therefore to be more employable. And also we need to try and succeed in implementing infrastructural investment rather than spending ever more on consumption. And that requires an improvement in the ability of municipalities and other public sector bodies to actually implement the projects that they have been set aside for them to do so, and not for the money to just disappear in the form of corruption and in the form of cadre deployment within the public service that actually doesn't help to translate any of these programs into real activity. The money seems to disappear, and we don't, as we've seen now with the Arts Council, you don't actually see it translating into real economic activity, even though the money has officially been set aside there for that activity.
Indeed. Dr Azar Jammine, thank you very much for your time, sir. As always, he's the Chief Economist at Econometrix.